Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome back to another Fallout 4 modding video. Today is going to be something a bit different from my usual content. I wanted to break down some of the gameplay that has come out from Fallout London. I had the pleasure of working with some of the lead devs in an interview and also sticking around for their live reveal of their gameplay trailer, and I have to say, this is some really incredible stuff. As Fallout players, we have been blessed lately for amazing projects like this, the release of things like Project Zeta and Point Lookout, and now we have a look at some gameplay from Fallout London. Now in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the official gameplay release, as well as showing off some of the Q&A stuff that we got in conjunction with this gameplay to help make some sense of some of the different things going on in the video. Now, if you haven't seen the gameplay trailer yourself already, I recommend you go and check that out on Fallout London's YouTube channel, as it is pretty incredible. That way you can hear all of the story beats and have some nice, clean, uninterrupted audio without me talking over it. But for those of you who have seen it, I'm going to be taking a bit of a deeper dive and looking at some of the really cool things that I noticed throughout the gameplay. Now, I'm not going to be covering some of the things like story beats, so I'm not going to let the audio play in its entirety, but we will cover some of the really cool and interesting stuff that I saw. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. Right off the bat, we are presented with a nice slideshow that has some amazing narration over it. Something that I do want to point out right off the bat is that everybody on this team is incredibly talented, and I mean it in every facet of the mod. The 2D art, the 3D modeling, the world space, the level design, the voice acting, the scripting, the questing, even just the world building in general is all top notch. Watching this trailer isn't like watching a mod trailer. It feels like we're watching a trailer for the next Fallout game. So these guys did an incredible job. This intro sequence with the slideshow and the narration is very classic and reminiscent of some of the classic Fallouts like 3 and New Vegas, and altogether really just helps cement their world and make this feel like its own game. Once the slideshow breaks, we are presented with a scene in which our main character is in some sort of a test tube, and there are two scientists in front of us. Now, a couple of interesting things here. This is very reminiscent of the Fallout 4 intro sequence, in my opinion, in that we do have some scientists prodding us as we are trapped in some sort of a tube. It's a nice little parallel while still being its own entirely. And the two doctors that are actually in this scene are played by two of the actual doctors from Doctor Who. I don't know how they landed those guys, but that is absolutely insane. Having really top-notch voice actors like that making an appearance really makes this thing feel official and amazing. So that's awesome and incredible stuff by them.
Quiet. Smythe will be pleased. How are they in appearance? Uncertain. Perhaps we should take a closer examination.
Now, during this test tube sequence, we do get to see a peek at the character creation that will be featured in Fallout London. Keeping in mind, this is intended to be completely separate from the vanilla Fallout 4 experience, there is a separate character creation as it's an entirely new story. Now, what's really interesting is a lack of the Vault-Tec presence, given that this does take place in London and not the US, so we see a lot of replaced art in character creation. Despite having the normal special stats, we do not have Vault Boy icons, but rather some pretty generic and standard icons with just some nice silhouettes. And then something that was a huge surprise for not only me, but a lot of people I saw in the live reveal is the return of traits. Things that we remember from games like Fallout New Vegas that were absent in Fallout 4, the ability to choose an additional couple of traits that will help specialize your character and give you some trade-offs to have more personalization and make your character feel unique. And traits are absolutely awesome, and I can't wait to see what the perk system is going to look like in Fallout London. Shortly following the character creation sequence, there is a large explosion in which a huge chunk of debris hits our test tube and kills one of the doctors. Following that, some armed people show up and kill the remaining doctors. And I'm not quite sure who we're dealing with just yet. We can't really get a super good look at these people given that the glass from our test tube is heavily distorting our vision. But you can see that they all look very different. So I'm assuming this is some sort of a ragtag group of militiamen, but I'm sure we'll find out more about that later. Once all of the threats have left the area, it is up to you to escape your enclosure, and what's really cool in this sequence is you're able to actually punch out the glass and it breaks in different segments. So once you break out enough of the glass, you can actually jump out of your test tube. Pretty cool. Rather than having it just open, you actually have to test out the melee mechanic. A nice way to actually teach you how to play the game. One thing that I do appreciate, and you see it throughout this intro sequence, is you do actually have to learn how to play again, as if you were playing Fallout again for the first time, as if this was its own standalone game. Pretty neat game design, and honestly just makes this feel really special. As the player moves through this crazy facility, we see a lot of new custom assets as well as a lot of reused vanilla assets that have been reused in ways that are very unique. For example, they enter this area that appears to be used to test on different animals or small creatures, and this uses some of the vanilla jail cells but shrunk down as little cages, and they look perfect. Honestly, this is a great reuse of a vanilla asset, and anything to save on space is excellent. And reusing assets like this is going to make the project feel cemented in Fallout's universe, and the new assets are going to also help bring some new life to the game, so that's pretty cool. We then get a look at the brand new terminal model, not our typical Vault-Tec terminal that we're used to, but something completely new that looks really, really cool. As the player opens it up, we can see the computer is made by Turing Computing, and it is called the TermLink. And we see a handful of entries. So obviously the terminals are going to have a bunch of lore just like what we are used to in past Fallout games. There's only one thing that we actually need on here, which is to reset the door mechanism, but there are 5 additional entries for us to learn. We have different logs as well as information on the Rad Shrew, which is a new creature type, so really cool to see stuff like that returning. One thing that's going to be really interesting is seeing how we actually get to uncover secrets about London, since there is no Vault-Tec here, so I'm really curious to see what is going on pre-war across the pond, and well, I'll let the lead devs talk about that a little bit more. One question that I do have myself is, I know obviously we're going to have a lot of post-war focused story content, but as seen in your trailer, you have a lot of stuff to do with the absence of Vault-Tec, given that it is set in London, and I'm curious how much of the pre-war stuff we're going to get to uncover as we play and learn about the world that we're set in.
So obviously we're quite lucky with the fact that Bethesda sort of left the door wide open in terms of the content that's out there. So we're sort of able to adhere to what scraps of information that they've actually put in place, but then we're allowed to elaborate on that to make it help fit with the mod. So that is very much something we're going to be driving through, and people will be able to read in terminals. You've got the tapes, just everything. You should be able to sort of learn as much as you can, because this isn't just about killing things. The whole point of this is a story, so you need to be able to learn the backstory of everything too. So that's a big focus for us.
Once done with the terminal, we do see the release of a handful of Rad Shrews, which are just going to be a nice little rat-based creature that we see running around in the Fallout London area. And this is just a fun little enemy, a replacement for the mole rats or the rad roaches that we are used to. It's cool to see the attention to detail, and rather than just reusing something simple like rad roach, we have something entirely new to fight against. Now, the next big thing that we encounter in the game is an area where the player sees a new device of some kind, and when you first encounter it, that's all it's called, is device. But right on the left and right side, you can see 2 Pip-Boys that we would recognize very much. It seems that these people were trying to recreate their own version of a Pip-Boy, so rather than having a generic Pip-Boy, which we do see on screen, we instead get the brand new Attaboy, which is going to be akin to a Pip-Pad of sorts. It's going to have similar animations and similar features of a Pip-Pad, so those of you who do like a handheld Pip-Boy device, you're really going to enjoy this part of the mod. What's really cool about the Attaboy is it can also interact with different mechanisms and doors, just like the Pip-Boy from Fallout 4, except this one's going to have its own custom animation, and it looks absolutely incredible, blowing into the cartridge and inserting it. Super retro, super cool, and honestly just brings a lot of life to this new Attaboy. After picking up the new device, the character moves on and enters third person, where we can get a look at the new starting outfit. Rather than a vault suit, we have something entirely different since we are not in a typical vault, but I do like that the gown sort of resembles the color scheme of a vault suit with a nice light grayish blue and yellow accents. It does provide that Fallout feel while still maintaining something of its own, which is kind of a good summation of the entire project as a whole. Keeping that Fallout feel and still being in the Fallout universe, but being standalone and creating its own story and its own presence, and honestly, the team is just nailing it. After listening to a brief conversation on the other side of a locked door, suddenly the power cuts out to the facility, and the character must find a new way to light up their path. You then find, next to a dead body, a nice little torch that your character is able to pick up. Those of you in the US, torch means flashlight, but in the game it will be known as a torch since we are in London. Once you pick it up, the character equips it to their belt, and now you have a functioning flashlight. So rather than the typical wrist-mounted light of a Pip-Boy, we have a fully functional flashlight that adds a lot more to the atmosphere. I know a lot of you guys like to mod in realistic-looking flashlights already, so this is going to be something pretty cool to have in the base version of Fallout London. As our character makes an escape from this huge complex, we do see them leave an elevator into a gigantic sort of atrium with huge screens, sort of resembling Big Brother, with a large mysterious figure on them, letting us know what's going on. This character on the screen is known as Mr. Smythe, and it's sort of unclear right now. I think it's presented to be the big bad villain, though that's something we may need to find out after doing some more of the main quest. Who knows, this could be some sort of a plot twist. They may be good after all, but as of right now, it is very much unclear. Though if I had to place a bet, I'd assume this is going to be the main villain of the questline. But there's no way to tell for sure. We'll just have to wait until we can actually get our hands on this thing. The character then proceeds to the London Underground, which is going to be a huge integral part of the location of Fallout London. This is going to be where you're able to get on trains and travel around the new areas, and given that it's such a huge part of transportation in London in real life, it makes sense that this has a huge appearance in Fallout London as well. The character then approaches a ticket reader and is not able to pass through the little toll booth unless they actually have a ticket. So then they turn around, find a skeleton who happens to be holding a ticket right there, and you are able to use said ticket to open up the little doors, and you can then proceed on to the train. Another interesting note here is that caps are not going to be the currency in this game, but rather train station tickets is going to be the adopted currency in Fallout London. So it is a fully functional currency, pretty cool stuff, and it's nice to see something different. It's a pretty small thing, but we also get a look at some loading screen art whenever the character travels to a new location. We see some nice backpacks, which tells us there's going to be backpacks in the game, something that Fallout should have always had in the base game, but never has, but now Fallout London will. And the little description even tells us that the different types of backpacks are going to have different amounts of carry weight. We then get to the end of the trailer where we see one of the coolest features, which is a fully functional trolley system. Your character hops on the train, gets in, and it goes. And this is going to be a new method of transportation in Fallout London. Of course, you can walk just about everywhere, but the train itself is also something you can use to get around much faster. So if you're doing a survival playthrough with no fast travel, the train is probably going to become your best friend pretty quick. And then we get a nice look over the cityscape, and I have to say, I talked about this in private with the devs, but I can't believe how much they nailed the city aspect of Fallout. We got a full-on city in Fallout 4, and there are a couple of locations in Fallout 4 that do look pretty neat, but it never feels like a proper city. It doesn't feel like the bustling Boston with a huge population, because the scale is just all wrong. They wanted to include many cities in Fallout 4, and so they had to decrease the scale a lot. Whereas in Fallout London, the scale looks phenomenal. This is a bustling city full of buildings. It's going to be insane to travel around this place. One question I know a lot of people had, especially after seeing how crazy the city is how Fallout London is going to perform on lower NPCs or just mediocre rigs, but don't be afraid. This does seem like something that's actually going to perform pretty well, but I think the lead devs can explain it a bit better themselves.
Yeah, so during the actual shooting of that gameplay, we did something called previs, pre-combines, that basically helps people on lower end systems run the game much smoother. And I can confirm myself it was running way better when you do that process. So it should be all good for lower end systems because we will focus on capping that for them, getting that in there so it works for them properly.
When I watched Sonny do it, because he was the one who set that up, he was rocking I think 60 FPS solidly, and that was through while he was on the moving train, moving fast through a very dense area, looking across. There's like a straight line where you can see straight across to the other side. So yeah, there was a lot going on there, and he had solid 60 FPS. Now, I run Windows 7. I purposely have not upgraded. I want to be on the lower end of the system so that I can be basically the test rig. And if I can run it fine, then yeah, that's acceptable. If you play the mod and you can't run, then you need to upgrade, because if I can run it fine on Windows 7 with bad hardware, and it runs fine for me and it doesn't for you, then yeah, maybe get your wallet out.
Now, before we go, I will leave you guys with a couple of clips from the live Q&A that I did yesterday so that you can have some really important questions answered by the lead devs. And in case you haven't seen that, there is an hour of questions and answers from myself and the lead devs of Fallout London that you can go and watch on my channel. It's completely up to you if you want to watch the entire thing, but I'll have a nice condensed version of it here with some highlights and a couple of the really important questions that I think a lot of you guys are going to want answers to. So again, I'll leave some of those here, and if you want to watch the full thing, it'll be linked down in the description below, as well as the Fallout London Project's website. Speaking on the different gameplay mechanics of Fallout, is there any plan to implement Fallout 4's settlement system and the ability to create different player home settlements, etc. in Fallout London? And if so, are there any settlement items unique to Fallout London?
Yes. So we already have them in and working. Sure, Wolfie's just sitting away sweating in chat. That was his task. He has them all in. We've made sure to put them in various different locations. So we've tried not to put them in places which, for example, the one that's in the vanilla game that's downtown, which for some reason you enjoy building in, Sunny, for reasons unknown. But it's yeah, we've made sure that if you want to be crazy, it's in areas that there's not a lot to load around, so you can go a bit crazy without your game melting. And we've made sure that they're in different areas, so none of them are samey. So one might be in an overgrown area, one that's a bit more swampy, one that's built up. So we give players more chance to sort of explore and have very unique settlements. But yes, that is all in and it's all working at the moment.
So is the entire map going to be urban? As we did see, there's a lot of underground and then a lot of dense city, or are we going to get to see some of the rural sides as well?
We originally jumped in and we were just doing the city, and then we realized that as great as it is, your performance would be terrible and it would just get very repetitive very quickly. So we made sure to make the world space large enough so that we have different biomes, so that way you have the areas off around like Bromley, Wandsworth, Richmond Park, which is all very greenery, where we can actually really explore the overgrown nature. And then you've got all the cityscape, obviously, towards the centre of London. But then we've also made sure to have areas such as Croydon, which is just like this cracked hellscape. So if you're playing the game, you'll very much be able to get all these different elements going around where it's not going to feel samey at all.
One question that I had, and I do see some people asking a bit, is what is the ratio going to be like when it comes to vanilla versus modded assets? Now, obviously, the world space is going to have mostly custom and new assets, but when it comes to armors, weapons, stuff that the player is actually going to interact with a lot, are we going to see a lot of vanilla weapons and armors being reused, or is it going to be a 50-50 split, or mostly your new stuff?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, in terms of that, actually, that's mostly all new. We always release stuff all the time. We've got some new stuff coming out soon. Yeah, actually, probably very little in terms of the original clothing and armors and the like are actually still in. Yeah, we decided that the thing that you're going to interact with a lot, pick up and the like, that's the sort of stuff that you want to have that's new. But the generic, like curbs or pavement stuff, that you can use the base game asset for that. It's fine. We've put a new texture on it, so it still seems new. But yeah, well, I think when people play, they'll be pleasantly surprised that there is a huge mix of new stuff, and the stuff that has been reused has been changed in a way that you probably won't recognize it without really studying it. So yeah.
Another one that I saw getting asked a whole lot, given that in Fallout you can usually craft your own food items, will you have the opportunity to make your own tea in Fallout London?
Yeah, we actually have a tea system. That was originally sorted out with the beans. I think you did that originally, Sunny. Yeah, where it's like you eat some beans from a bean tin, and then you get a tin in your inventory as well. But we also have the same system where you can make your own tea. You then have your tea in your teacup. You drink the tea, and then you get a teacup or a saucer in your inventory as well. So you get some like china and ceramic as well.
So yeah, guys, that is Fallout London as we know it so far. The gameplay release was huge, and I think this has a lot to be excited for. With that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you want to see more content like this, where we take a look at some of the bigger mod projects and give some details as to what's going on behind the scenes. I loved working with these guys, and I really hope to have the opportunity to work with other mod projects in the future. With that, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a rating, subscribe if you haven't already for more videos just like this, consider checking out the Patreon if you're interested in supporting the channel, though it is completely optional, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Peace!